upload this afterwards. So, Kong, first of all, has anyone noticed the repo changes, the organization? Everything's now under the OpenFaaS organization. So if you're looking for something and you were thinking, well, if you've moved it, how do I find it? How do other people find it? Well, GitHub does a redirect automatically. So there was an issue open for this about 2-3 months ago, and now I've managed to get pretty much everything into here. The import paths for code should really be updated to say things like OpenFaaS/FaaS, right? And at the moment they say Alex Ellis FaaS. But for the time being,
on the client fix that.
Sorry?
There's a PR in on the CLI that fixes that already. So.
Wow, that's very, very quick. Impressive. So it sounds like we're already making roads there. So basically, the FaaS repo that you knew, it's just moved from my account. It's kept the same name. So it's not OpenFaaS/FaaS, it's just OpenFaaS. It's not OpenFaaS/OpenFaaS, it's OpenFaaS/FaaS. We've got OpenFaaS/FaaS CLI, FaaSneties, everything is there. And one of the neat side effects that you get from this is before when we were managing issues, we couldn't look at them across all of the repos, whereas now you can set up a project, so October, November, what we're going to work on, and we can do things like add a column and make this look a bit like a Kanban board. So if John, you have you've got something here, right, to change all the imports. Well, let's pull that across, and now that's in the to-do. And so we can look at this across all of the repos, and that's a really cool sort of side effect. Maybe we'll take a look at that later. So going back to OpenFaaS and FaaS, we've now got Jono's guide merged. Thank you very much for all the hard work on that and backwards and forwards. We also got some input from the team that run Kong, so Mashape, which is nice as well, and they've been sharing that on social media. So hopefully we can try and get them to write a blog post about it, and we'll get even more coverage about it. So the way that Kong works is that it sits in front of any API, and it effectively will stop anything coming in. And then selectively, you can set up some rules to allow traffic to come through. Now, somebody asked me in London, why would you still keep an API gateway for FaaS if Kong is there? And the answer that I gave was, I don't think Kong wants to do all of the container orchestration. Right, so our API gateway is a bit like a container gateway, if you like. And Kong is a true API gateway that's very generic. It can do things like set up. So if I just run down this list quickly, it can set up basic authentication. So then you need a username and password to access an API. So there's an example here that Jono's given. And then when you start trying to use it, you actually find that you need to pass in an authorization header to use one of your functions. And that could be really good if you have something that is aware of passwords. Not everything is. So for instance, GitHub wouldn't know what to do with that. And GitHub has its own kind of integrations. But if you had something running internally within your business or at a bank, then it would totally make sense to be able to set up something like a one-off password. And then Jono also goes on to say, well, about adding SSL, because at the moment, the way people are setting up the API gateway is kind of anything that you send can be sniffed on your network and picked up. It's not secure, and it's not necessarily meant to be out the box because that makes things a bit slower to get set up. But if you follow these instructions here, you can then enable HTTPS. And so any traffic that comes in is going to be encrypted up to the point that it hits Kong, and then it will go into your Docker Swarm. So all the things that you see here are really perfect examples of what you could do to harden OpenFaaS, so that when you've got it deployed on the internet, maybe on your cloud provider, and somebody finds your URL, you're not going to be compromised, because at the moment, I think we're all aware that if you find the URL, you can just delete everyone's functions or deploy some weird bot to it, right? And there's no protection against that. So definitely take a look at this guide. It's very simple to run through, and it uses Docker Swarm services again. So what we might want to do is think about, I don't know if you've used Kubernetes, Jono, but doing one that uses them.
Yeah, I've considered doing that. I haven't used Kubernetes, but something I'd like to do at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we actually have a one-line startup script, which is exactly the same as what you have for Docker Swarm. The only thing is you need to either set up what's called Minikube or a cloud host deploy on there. And then you could just run in the one line and just start creating your services and playing with it. So maybe, do you think you could open an issue later on as a proposal?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So, any questions for John about the Kong integration?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, it looks good. I've used Kong in the past, and I think it's pretty decent.
Cool. Good. All right. Well, maybe once you guys have a chance to have a look at it and figure out exactly what it's doing, you could drop some messages into Slack and go from there. Right. Where's this Google Doc gone? Okay. So that's Kong. Nick's just arrived, so thanks for joining. Hope you had a nice dinner. Would you be able to give us a quick demo of Nomad?
Yeah, of course.
Is
I
10 minutes
apologize.
enough?
Sundays. Yeah. Sundays can be quite bad for me. Let me. How do I share my screen? I think I've got a request from No, I don't. I don't want remote control of your screen.
Should just be up the top.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, it's right down the bottom.
Okay, cool.
I do them every day, and it's. You can see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. Let me find something that's working. All right, cool. So what I've been building out is a provider for Nomad. So Nomad, if nobody's heard of it before, is a scheduler kind of like Kubernetes. It kind of does very, very similar things, except Nomad is very much concentrating just on scheduling. It'll also schedule things like containers, not just Docker. It'll do LXC, Rocket. You can do any form of application binary that you can run on the machine. It'll run on Windows as well as on Linux, and a whole kind of bunch of other stuff, including like jars, and so you can basically proc it, sort of C-root your own applications. So the way that Nomad works, it is very similar to Kubernetes in that you have services, so you can build out jobs. And I apologize, I haven't got any syntax highlighting on this. So you've got a job here. This is FaaS Nomad. I'm going to tell it I want that in the DC1 data center. It's a system job, which means it's going to run on every node. I want one of them and some various other stuff. The environment variables here. This is something which I need to resolve to sort out properly. And that's because I'm currently trying to work out the best way of setting up Nomad for developing, because when you run Nomad in as a normal server, you bind it to a particular IP address, which means that this sort of stuff isn't needed, because you can use the inbuilt environment variables. But when you're running it in dev mode, because you're kind of loosely binding it, it does. And also on Docker for Mac, because of the way that Docker for Mac works, you kind of need, whoops. To set environment variables like, oh, well, you can use the magic IP. So anyway, so you run, so that's got the two containers. It's got FaaS Nomad, and it's also got the gateway. You can run it simply. Oh, let me. Just by Nomad run and then passing it the file. And this works also if you don't use the CLI, you can use, it's fully API driven as well. So now you can see I've got FaaS Nomad running in there. And I've got two of those running. And again, I can kind of
can you just
dig
explain
into that.
Sorry, Nick, can you just explain what you're typing in? I think it's probably the first time I've ever seen this.
Oh yeah. So I'm just using the Nomad CLI. So the Nomad CLI's got a fully featured CLI. So Nomad status, that will show all of the jobs which are running on the server. So I've got one function, and I've got the system job. If I drill into that, I can do Nomad status.
Silly question, Nick. Effectively, that FaaS Nomad, the system service you've got running,
Yeah,
you could kind of think of that as like a Docker Compose running on Swarm. That's everything, the gateway, Prometheus, but it's bundled up within sort of Nomad sort of framework.
Yeah, Nomad. I suppose the most, if you use Kubernetes, one of the so it's like kind of a compose file, or in Docker world, sorry, in Kubernetes world, it's more like a pod. But whereas kind of Kubernetes is quite loosely coupled around things, so you've obviously got load balancing, replication groups, and all of that sort of stuff. Nomad's not so much like that. So Nomad doesn't have the concept of load balancer. It doesn't do load balancing for you. If you want to do that, you've got to use a reverse proxy like Nginx or something. And things like replication groups, well, you kind of just specify how many instances of something you want in the job file by specifying a count. And yeah, but you can kind of layer up these things. So a job is just kind of a collection of groups, and a group is something which will always be positioned together on an instance. So in that way, it's more like a group is like a pod, and a job can just be multiple groups. But more often than not, you kind of just deploy a couple of things like this.
That's a really good explanation. So is that actually running on the cluster now? Or on
Yeah,
the
so
laptop?
I've got that running on the cluster now. If I let me just grab the logs on Alex. Damn it. So you got to kind of drill in a little bit. There is a UI for Nomad, which we just released at HashiConf, but I've not got it installed yet. So I'm just kind of plowing through the UI.
And so have we got the services up, but like the UI, is that there as well?
Yeah, you can install it. I just haven't.
The FaaS UI. The gateway.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the FaaS UI is running.
Yeah. Cool.
So we've got. So I think. Sorry, I'm binding it to a specific IP address. That should work. Because I'm having all sorts of pain trying to get the...
Did it not show it in the top right-hand pane there in your task resources?
You've got
the 165.80.
So I'm not sure if I'm... it should allow me to... Oh, there we go.
Nice. Okay.
I was just in the wrong. Yeah, so you've got all the UI and stuff like that is working.
Can you hit the function?
I can see. Yeah. Should be able to. Let's have a look. So this is what. Damn it. What we've been trying to kind of debug.
You can always recover that by saying that's your demo that returns signal killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm doing here is I'm killing any errant processes on a server. No, it's so what I'm currently trying to debug is getting the IP address resolutions correctly, because obviously when I'm inside of a container and I get the IP address, I need the I need a publicly accessible IP address.
Yeah.
So it's trying to get Nomad configured the right way more so than anything. It's actually more difficult trying to configure it in that way on a local instance than it is to throw it up on a bigger cluster. So if let me just quickly. Oops. Is that the right one? Okay. So for some reason, that does not want to work. And what's also interesting is I'm not, oh shit. Let's have a look. What I'm trying to call finished. So that actually looks like it's calling downstream correctly. So what I'm doing is I'm using Console as a service discovery catalog. So I've got that running inside there, and I've also got a load balancer. If I okay, and then so that's an interesting baguette. Damn it.
So this looks really interesting, Nick. It looks like you've done a lot of work here, and I know you changed over your laptop this morning or yesterday, right, to get Linux.
Yeah, I've been trying to. When I'm running it on Docker, it's fine with Docker for Mac,
yeah,
but it's trying to get things running on Ubuntu when Docker for Mac's a pain in the ass because Nomad's running on in essence, Nomad's running on a different machine to Docker because Nomad runs outside the VM and the way they kind of Docker for Mac. So it's just a matter of going through and ironing out those last few bugs.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's wrap it up there, and we'll take a look at a couple of the other things we've got. So, does anyone have any questions for Nick before we move on?
No, that's pretty cool. Like the the repo that you've got up and running. If some of us want to kind of sort of basically follow along with what you're doing and set it up locally, is what's there kind of pretty sort of obvious in terms of setup.
Yeah, it works on Docker for Mac. So what I'm sort of just trying to do at the moment is get around the problems of IP addresses, so you can set it up on different platforms. So on what I'm also trying to do is get functional tests put into the build process. The unit tests are all there and fine, but I started going through and setting up functional tests. So yeah, so that's all up and good. I'll have most of the bugs ironed out tomorrow morning. I literally got back from the US.
Don't worry about the bugs. Don't worry about the bugs. We'll find them once we start playing with it.
Oh yeah,
that's how it works. So now we have a Swarm backend and a Kubernetes backend, and someone submits an issue and they're like, I do this thing and it doesn't work. You know, what are you talking about? And then I'll try it. And I'm like, no, it works fine. And then you realize that they've written in the notes, this is for Kubernetes, and I've been trying it on Swarm for the last 3 months. So yeah, I think adding Nomad there as well, we'll find some bugs for you, definitely. Okay, so John's going to show us, just to keep the time, he's going to show us a bit about updates now.
Yeah, so again, didn't realize I was going to do this, so apologies if this goes completely AWOL. So one of the issues we had was we only really supported a kind of a delete and create sort of when you were updating your functions, which kind of wasn't great because it meant that you were basically just going to have like a stop the world outage on your functions. So Alex had started working on sort of implementing like a proper rolling update on the Kubernetes backend, and I picked up the equivalent on the Swarm backend. So just to sort of show you that happening, we've got the simple Ruby echo function, and what I've done is I've just, to sort of be able to tell that, you know, it's going to pick up a new image, it's just outputting a sort of a version from the image, so that when I invoke it, you can see it's actually pulling the correct version out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this up to 3 functions so we can kind of watch what happens. So we've got 3 functions. They're all running this Ruby Echo latest image, and they're running with like 2 sort of environment variables, like the mainf process and just this like dummy mynewenv. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new environment. I'm going to change this environment variable here and add another one. And then I'm going to build this. I'm running with I have my own sort of Docker registry running that Swarm is hooking into. So let's see. So I'm going to build the function. Oh, actually, sure, I need to update this. I'm going to update this to, let's say, version X, so that we can tell that it's actually been picked up.
Can you deploy it, John? Can you just deploy it as it is and then rebuild it afterwards, so that we do it separately?
Well, no, I already have it deployed, so I'm just gonna update it.
So if you didn't build it a second time, then you can check whether, so there could be a testing scenario. You change the image and you change the environment is one scenario. Change the image only is another. Change environment only is another.
Oh yeah, no, it does all that. Like
Yeah.
I can do this. I can go in and put a dev tag on that because I have a dev image pushed. And then if I go, so I'm going to deploy that out. So replace false, it means that it's going to, we might need to change the sort of the use of flags here. Replace basically is false disables the kind of delete create, and the update just triggers a service update rather than a service create. So if I run that, we look at what's happening over here. If we go and look at the swarm, you can see that it stopped this. It stopped one that's running Ruby Echo, and it's added one that's running Ruby Echo Dev. It stopped another one. It's adding another Ruby Echo Dev, and then it finally does the does the last one. And it keeps these. There's a previous spec which we potentially use for rollback. So if these fail within like a certain window of opportunity, you can just immediately sort of roll back. So if we look at the services now, you can see that it's running off the new image. It's picked up the environment variable changes. And I think that the dev has a slightly different output here. So if I go like that, yeah, it's gone to a version 5, which was an earlier release. So the point the example I was going to show before was if I build the same image, it still picks that up. So I'm going to revert this back to 6 and build it. That's already built. I'm going to push it. And then I'm going to just deploy it again. So that will go ahead and start deploying across the swarm again. Like I can continue to hit this. Oh, maybe not. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. There's obviously something wrong there with it should still be letting me hit those endpoints.
The changes to the load balancing of service discovery.
Yeah, there it eventually kicked in. That's weird. So yeah, it looks like there's something going on there with the load balancing within Swarm that we need to take a look at. But anyway, I can show this other piece. So if I build this with the same name, so previously I was going from Ruby Echo Latest to Ruby Echo Dev, which is an obvious change. I'm going to build this. It's going to still have the same tag. So like that. Watch it out. Deploy it. So you can see it's pushing out the Ruby Echo Latest again. And if I start hitting this, you can see it's picked up the new version. So I think that was the case you were concerned about, Alex, in terms of we haven't actually changed the image. If you're just pushing latest or pushing a dev tag, it'll update. Yeah, I need to find out what's going on in terms of the sort of load balancing in the swarm there. That is not expected.
As long as you get
isn't our issue.
As long as you get eventual consistency, it doesn't matter because this is better than what we had. The problem that we had with Kubernetes was if you use the old model of delete the service definition and the deployment and then recreate it, actually the way Kubernetes does it is it marks the old one as ready to be deleted and then it kind of keeps it in that state and it doesn't get rid of it. So when you create it again, it says, hang on, I can't create that because there's already one with that name. And so that's why we've had to go and do the update for Kubernetes, because half the time it worked and the rest of the time it didn't. So if we do an update, which is actually what we really wanted to do, then Kubernetes will be happy And the way we do that is by, even if you've got the same tag, is by putting some metadata on the deployment that lets Kubernetes know that it needs to basically wreck the old one and recreate it. We just apply a label with a timestamp.
Yeah, I'm actually applying the same label on the Swarm side, even though we're not using it, just for consistency, because it is kind of useful that you can kind of see the timestamp of when you last updated.
That's very useful. Yeah.
Probably put the same thing into Nomad. Again, just for consistency with Nomads, it's got inbuilt concept of rolling updates. Yeah. So you can actually do blue, greens, and canaries just built into the job file. You just tell it what the sort of the stagger is and how many things to roll at once, and it'll just automatically whenever you update a job. So
yeah, it's exactly the same as Swarm. We're going with the default for pretty much everything except there's a parallelism sort of flag, which we're just going with one just to do like a very simple rolling update. Probably want to expose the ability to have somebody tune that if they know exactly what they want. Just about tags, I was thinking it could be useful if we start actually pushing a lot more information into the tags, like language and things like that, because we could do sort of kind of more interesting things on the UI side and the CLI side.
Yeah, I'm happy to put, I think you're talking about label schema, right, aren't you, a little bit?
Yeah.
So if you want to open a proposal, I think that would be cool. Even if we don't use it, just to have some of the metadata. So the FaaS CLI version that was used to generate it, maybe we should start putting some metadata alongside the templates we're using, so that can be embedded too. But yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And thanks for the demo. Now we've got about 20 minutes left. Any questions about the update? I think there's something we need to just kind of maybe go over the syntax. And I think we're going to have to change that as well.
Alex.
Yeah.
Is it worth codifying the update into the certifier? I mean, that would be potentially. Would it be a difficult thing to codify? That should be okay.
So, like, you're thinking about how you get, well, we'd have to think about how we get the metadata back out again. I guess that's the only thing.
Yeah. Because can you get it from the list endpoint, or?
If we exposed it, you could. So we'd have to inspect the container spec and figure out whether it had anything in it that was interesting. And then when someone had deployed their own function, which is just a regular Docker container, it wouldn't be there. But yeah, I think that's interesting to start to look into, is like, is there metadata that we can place somewhere and start to extract? I think theoretically, people don't even need to use Docker as a backend. So if we tightly couple ourselves to, well, we probably should tightly couple to Docker images, but with Nomad, I guess you could just run a exe, right? If we asked it to. Yeah.
So, you could run job. A job doesn't really care. Well, I'd have to change the way that it's built, because at the moment the job I'm using like a standard job template, which is using the Docker driver, so it would have to be exposed.
I don't think it's something that we should do right now, but just to have that idea.
I'll be honest, I like Docker containers. I think Docker containers serve two really, really good purposes. One is obviously the containment, and whilst Nomad will fork exec and it'll c-root everything, you do get that nice containment. The other nice thing about Docker containers is that they're portable. You've got a mechanism of distribution and a central registry for distributing them. If we start introducing things like raw exec, then you sort of have to start working out where you put your artifacts. You also have to work out whether, are you going to tar them.
Okay, I agree.
I think
so. Containers all the way. But somebody could implement a backend and do whatever they wanted. So at some point, as long as they can manage the metadata we want them to manage, it doesn't matter if they, if it's just a mock endpoint.
You could go the Azure route and spin up EC2 instances.
Yeah, there you go. So let's take a look. We've got about like 15 minutes left. I want to give some time for everyone to just have an intro and a chat. So one of the last things I wanted to show, Nick touched on this, is this project called Certify. It's got a Dash incubator on it because as people start to look at this project, they're going to think, well, what's ready, what's finished? This definitely isn't ready. But it's up at the top. And when you go into it, you see that there's a test folder and there's this deploy test here right now. And what it does is it kind of does some testing pipelines. So using Go unit test framework to do some end-to-end testing. It will do things like deploy a strong hash image, then test that there was something that came back when we did a list. We've got some other stuff in here as well, like this one's a bit more interesting. It's testing that if you pass a list of custom environmental variables, when you invoke env as the process, that you actually see one of the ones that you put in it. So that would be a great way to test. I think there was a potential bug that Ian found from Microsoft as he was testing on Kubernetes, and he was saying, where are my environmental variables? Well, if we can kind of point this at his Kubernetes cluster and run it, we can see that everything is good, right? Now, there are obviously a lot of problems when you start to do end-to-end testing with getting the right state, being able to restart from a known point. And so there's a make file in here. And if I type in make test, you see it uses the gateway URL, and then it does a go test and tells me what it's run. And in this instance, it ran both tests, and actually this one deploys a function and then waits for it to be ready and then calls it and checks the value. And you see how that was really fast. That's because it's hot. Now, if we look in the make file, if you just do make swarm, it will actually remove those hot functions before it runs them again. So if I go make swarm and then test, see they just disappeared, and it was actually pretty quick again. So here we go. It's taking a bit longer now because it's probably hitting that 500 error that you see sometimes when you deploy it and it's not quite ready. And here's the output. So I had this retry 5 times by putting a loop. And so it will log the output, but it won't fail it until it's done all of its attempts. And this is what the code looks like. So we've got 5 attempts, hard-coded, 2 seconds per attempt in between, and it's going through, and hopefully by the end everything's good. I haven't actually put a hard fail in this yet. So what we need to do is say at the end, if you did actually get what you wanted, if you didn't get what you wanted, to fail it. So you can see here we actually went 5 times, none of them actually passed. That time round it was still hot, so I told it to delete it, but then it hadn't actually managed to delete it. Well, these tests will be great for what we're doing with Nick, with Nomad and Hyper. Also going to be great for testing OpenFaaS with every release to check that there's no regression. So if people are interested, it would be great if you could get involved with that, or at least just check it out, try it on your own cluster. And I think one of the things we might look at, Nick suggested using Cucumber and Golang. I think we need to probably try a few things out, break this, see if we're happy with it, and then maybe look at enhancing it with something like Cucumber as like a DSL. There is a way.
The one thing I was. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there's a way to set timeouts that's really important for when people come and they're like, I'm running my video conversion and your project doesn't work, right? And that's happened a few times recently. There's 2 places where timeouts can be set. One is at the gateway. The second is in the function itself through environmental variables, read timeout and write timeout. I'll just share this gist in the channel. The other place that's started to come in is obviously now we have a Kubernetes backend, or we have a Nomad backend. That's a third place where there could be timeouts. Okay, so I'll just share this and then we'll go back to the room. So what were you saying, Nick?
So I was thinking just around the sort of the certifier. Because like there should be specifying like a loose specification that there's a default timeout of. Oh, sorry. So then that way it's like that. Attempt to try and do when you're building out your own backend, just to avoid the fact.
Sort of giving people giving people the ability to understand how to dimension the systems and stuff that they run these backends on, because the timeout's going to be the timeout that you can sustain is going to depend upon the specific. If you have a huge big system, then you can run tons of stuff with massive timeouts, but you have like a smaller tiny instance, then you can't sustain that. So I don't think that's something we've touched on yet.
So this is just early days, as I said. That's why it's got that word in the title. So it's wrong, but it works. So the timeout is 5 seconds for a deploy. That will never work on an EC2 instance pulling a 200 meg image. But that's okay, because let's start walking. Let's start doing some stuff, see how it works, flag these things up, and then we'll refine it as we go. But for now, you can test your local gateway.
So the other thing is if we, so this is just a kind of a general sort of thing. If I was going to write a functional test that tested an API, I wouldn't use the API to validate I wouldn't use the API to validate the test, if you know what I mean. So if I had a post, an API which did a post, and I want to validate that that's actually done something correctly, I wouldn't use the get endpoint to be able to validate that, just in case the get endpoint in itself has got bugs. So, but then I suppose if you're running it on against something like ECS, then you've got a much bigger problem. So I'm thinking, well, you could go direct to Docker to be able to get the running function.
I think you're right, Nick. I think you're definitely right. And if it was let's say it's an integration test for the specific backend, like the Swarm one, then we should check in the Swarm API that it did what we thought it would do. So the ones that we've got here are really like black box, like looking from the outside. So if you tell me that you created a function and I invoke it and it gives me what I think I want, then I don't care if you're just like catting responses back to me or giving canned responses, as long as like you can answer all the questions. I think it will go some way to be a regression test. But yeah, there needs to be more at the specific level for the projects.
Yeah, so maybe then they just have to be spun into, because I was almost thinking like, because the integration tests that you want to do are probably going to be exactly the same across all of the backends. The assertions would be different. So maybe step 2 is to do more of an integration test, but have like a way that the tests stay the same, but what you actually do is implement your own interface around the assertion.
What's there is kind of like an end-to-end integration. So it assumes you've got every single piece wired up and working. Like, I guess what you're kind of saying is you want to be able to kind of test individual sort of endpoints without relying on the other sort of FaaS endpoints.
Yeah, so that's what the integration test will be at the repo level. And then this one is really, okay, so Hyper comes in and they go, well, we've done everything now, it's fully working, and we run this, and we're like, well, you can't handle custom environmental variables. You can't scale up when I ask you to. It takes you 10 minutes to deploy an image, or, you know, the latency is unacceptable. So that's kind of my vision for the certify one, is that it'll be completely black box. But yeah, I'd love to see some integration tests starting to come up. I think Eric enhanced the ones that we had for the gateway, and we don't actually run them in the build yet. So we should definitely add them to Travis so that we're at least running them on every build, even if we're just deploying to the Travis CI box, initializing a single node swarm there. I think we can do fancier and fancier CI things as we go on, multi-host clusters and stuff like that too.
Because I'm just thinking then, because actually with the certifier, once all of the tests are in the certifier, they are actually probably 90% of the integration tests that I'd want to write. So actually, maybe the solution is that the certifier, when it's doing its assertion, if you implement that kind of interface thing for the assertions, and you can just plug in your own interface, the CLI or the internal endpoints could actually be one of those interfaces. So you can do the black box with that, and then if you want to do something super specific with checking either the Docker APIs or the schedulers APIs, then that would just be another implementation of the same.
Yeah, that sounds really good, especially as regards the using the CLI, because we will have regressions in the CLI as well at some point. So if you can write the test once about deploy, list, invoke, and you can implement it on both, that could be great. So I think if we start to write a little bit of both and we see where the duplication is, that will help us understand where to start defining the interface. Yeah, that'd be cool. So anybody who is like, well, where do I start? I don't know. Maybe I don't know Go. I don't know the deeper parts of it. This could be a good way to start scratching the surface and adding some tests, or take one that's there and modify the input and output.
Yeah, and it could be a compiled binary in itself, right? I mean, so if you don't know Go, if you're implementing a backend in Ruby or something like that, then all you could do is you're just running the binary and hitting APIs. It could be a pretty sweet way of doing something like that. I'm going to get stuck into some more tests tomorrow, so I might push some updates, but I'm going to follow the pattern that you're using right now, before anything else. I think it's worth getting it complete and then refactoring it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've tried to keep it as basic as possible, and I think to some extent, you know, it might start to gripe a bit, but then that when you start from that simplicity and you build out, I think that's generally what we've done with the project so far, and it's worked up to now. So we'll try it again. Great. Oh, looking forward to seeing that. Does anyone have a hard stop, like in 2 minutes, and wants to drop off? If anyone wants to say, okay.
I'm going to say hello and goodbye to you all, because I've got a block party to go to in the afternoon here.
Nice.
But good to be part of this, and thanks for including me.
Well, Ed wanted to say we've got ARM64 working now. So on Packet,
that's awesome.
I've got the API gateway built as a cross-platform binary, and it's running there. And then I made a cross-platform base Alpine image, so running SHA-SEM on it. and node info for Node.js as well. So I think Ed's more aware of the problems with ARM64 than a lot of us are, but basically the main issue is not that stuff doesn't work, it's that there's no official images for what we want yet. So with
Right.
Golang, I've used the Debian base instead of the Alpine base. For Prometheus, I've had to find one in the community and various other bits like that.
Yeah, so the general observation is that somewhere between a quarter and a third of images that I've inspected are multi-arch with ARM versions. The big PR that I'm waiting to drop is a multi-arch Alpine official version. And once that happens, a lot of things are going to get knocked over from that. So I know the work is in progress. I know that it's priority enough for enough people that it's going to happen. And I'm just sort of watching it carefully to see it all happen. And then see what shakes out, see what doesn't happen. Work on it from there.
Yeah, sounds good. And one of the things we might do as part of that to help with the Raspberry Pis that I've got stacked up back there. There's a Docker swarm and a Kubernetes cluster. Is have a multi-arch inside our images and CI, so that in all of the config files it just says gateway 06.6. There's none of this -arm HF. Those images will still exist, but we'll just push one using something called the manifest tool. And then when Docker pulls that, it says, what's my architecture? What does that map to? And if there's something there, it will pull it down. If it doesn't exist, it tells you.
Right, so it should really radically simplify things once it stops being complex.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Cool.
Okay, I'm gonna buzz off. Thanks for you all, and talk to you again sometime soon.
Cheers, Ed.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nick.
Later.
Really appreciate what you're doing. It's very cool.
Well, that's cool. So by Friday, I need to get this all working properly, because I'm already committed to demoing OpenFaaS on a multi-cloud Nomad cluster. So originally I was just going to go GCP and AWS, but I'm pushing the boat even further. So I'm going to have OpenFaaS running on Nomad cluster, which span GCP, AWS, and Azure. So it's the ultimate in high availability. You can actually afford to lose 2 data centers before your 2 cloud providers, not even data centers.
Yeah. Before
it goes out, and I think that should work quite nicely with the metadata, because I can use the metadata for regional distribution and stuff like that.
There's something. Have you guys seen the demo that I set up over the weekend with the stars?
Oh no!
So I'm just thinking of there's a ton of things we have that it might be fun for you to demo, Nick. That if you can figure them out. But basically, Alex the bot is he's tweeting who stars the repo, and
nice.
He's putting them in a Polaroid picture as well.
Nice.
So these are all the mugshots. Now, the reason I've done this is because I want to take this to Milan on Wednesday, Thursday, and John's coming out as well. And I wanted to have people star the repo and get something cool happen, but not have it be the syncing the GitHub avatars through S3. So I thought, well, how can we make it a bit more interesting? And so now you get your picture turning up here, and I've actually put a cache in it as well. So if you go in there and you're like, well, I'm going to do it 100 times, every time you do it, it extends the time that you've got to wait until you can do it again. So,
so I'm going to unstar you and then star you again.
Yeah, do it now.
Yeah,
just don't change your avatar to something inappropriate, because that will come out of my account.
Shouldn't have told us that.
And there's nothing really I can do about that.
Yeah.
Is it the standard FaaS? Oh yes, there is. Have you seen Machinebox?
No, but that could be what I need. There we go.
Oh, awesome! That's sweet. So Machinebox has a thing called Nudebox,
Right.
And what Newtbox will do is it'll analyze an image and it'll give you, I think it uses it's like a wrapped up version of TensorFlow, but it's a project by Matt Ryer and David Hernandez, who are like two super awesome gophers.
Nice.
So
Cool.
Newtbox will potentially stop somebody changing their GitHub repo to something that you don't necessarily want on your Twitter
I mean,
feed.
at least they have to wait, I think, like 5 hours before they can do it again. And that might be enough for them to not to want to bother.
Yeah.
We've actually packaged TensorFlow as a FaaS function. And I showed that in LA. It's similar to this. In fact, you can just figure out what is in the image. But it doesn't do humans, so it will think that you're like a tennis racket or something.
Alex, do you want me to try and get the menu bar app kind of wrapped up? I've got the you're talking about sort of Matt Ryer. I've done a Go I've written a Go library for building bitbar applications. So
Nice.
it's got the guts of a bitbar app for OpenFaaS that you can hook up to multiple gateways and check status and see graphs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely a cool project. Yeah. So I thought, well, how can we get to the 6,000 stars? Hey, there's Jono. By next week, and I don't know if we'll actually hit it, but we got something like 400 or 500 in a week, which is still pretty good. If we get to 6K, it'd be nice to say. So I've been putting a few bits on Hacker News and trying to get people interested.
I reckon we can hit 6K by the end of the week.
So it needs a lot. It actually needs a lot of driving, like posting stuff.
I'll ask my mom. Yeah, that's one.
So the thing is, once I get the Nomad provider done, then I'm going to write a blog post, which will then get sent by HashiCorp's like central media account and Twitter and stuff like that. And we generally get a metric shit ton of views on a lot of our posts. So I reckon we could do that and then just basically get that one liner in there and say to see it in operation, start on GitHub and then check out AlexBot on Twitter.
And it's in a Polaroid frame as well, right?
Yeah. So I reckon that'll totally push 6,000.
And maybe we need to look at the nude box in between. The code for that is actually on GitHub, and it's
it's horrible to say, but you know where the money is in all of this. Taking that machine box and instead of filtering out the hits, you filter out everything that doesn't hit, and you've got a little sort of niche feed for people.
So that's evil.
I wonder if Matt's thought of that.
Well, I see John's thought of it. So here's what it looks like. Basically, the GitHub code comes in here. We then post off to getAvatar function that returns literally the binary of your image and what the extension type is. Then write it into Minio, and we call the tweetgazer function, which gives you the login name and the file name. Tweetgazer, which is that one, doesn't do much really. It just loads up the Twitter API, Tweepy. It does a get to the Minio object storage, and then it puts it through the Polaroid filter. So if you delete that, you'll just get it looking normal. And then it writes it to temporary file system, uploads it, and deletes the file again. And it's kind of a nice pipeline, as you can just keep adding stuff in there, like Machinebox. And I don't think I pushed the change for the Redis. I think I was just hacking on that before we got on here. But again, all I did was deploy Redis in a cluster,
So I wrote. I think so. I built this using.
Here you go. That's the code for Redis.
Using Machinebox. So I might take your Polaroid and raise you emojifying a detected face.
Yeah, let's do it. Cool. Well, that's really really exciting. Looking forward to seeing that for sure. And we've got some cool stuff to demo if you want some stuff to run on Nomad or whatever you write.
Cool.
We can go off and demo. The last thing was the environment file is a new thing that helps you stop checking in your secrets. And
nice.
So basically it allows you to have both at the same time. So you can have environment and environment file. And they run in order. So if you had like in Twitter default secrets, even though that doesn't make sense, you could have that first and then your actual secret second. And it will just gradually run them in. So that's got 60-minute cache for being a fan.
So something else that I was thinking of, and I genuinely have to run away, but do any of you all use Terraform?
Have you seen the Terraform thing that Sivo did?
I saw something in the chat, yeah, because we've got the module registry now.
Yeah,
I was thinking it's because I'm probably going to create some Terraform modules for running a Nomad cluster, but it might be kind of cool to have a bunch of stuff, because actually with the way the modules work, if you wanted to create a Kubernetes cluster on JKE, you could just have a standard Terraform module which creates that, and then just use the Terraform provider to deploy the pods for. It just might be a.
No, that'd be really cool. I think that's one of the things. That guy that joined today, Andrea Turley, he works on Apache Brooklyn. I used to work with him on that like a while ago. I think he's thinking about sort of putting together like a blueprint for pretty much the same thing. So whatever providers whatever infrastructure sort of tooling you're using, the more the merrier. Be cool.
Yeah. That'd be. So you basically just throw any image link at it, and it doesn't use Nubox, so you can even use images of American presidents without it rejecting them as violent and inappropriate.
Oh, that's harsh.
It's totally random. It doesn't do anything else other than. But yeah, it was literally just a little thing I was hacking around with on. Getting even harsher. when Matt first built.
So they're not all sad. Yeah.
No. It literally just uses a random.
Did you build this site then?
A random. Yeah. So it's just
an API.
Yeah. So the site itself, I think, is just React, but the back end, it just uses a simple RESTful API, and you just posted a URL.
Neat.
I have to run, but it's been a pleasure talking to you all. And